Okay, let's get started. Welcome everybody. My name is Boris. I'm the founder and CEO of Bink. Wanted to welcome everyone to our community webinar series. This is an initiative that we incepted just a few months ago to get people together from in and around our community to share and learn from one another on a variety of different topics related to our space, all for the benefit of working together to help companies build the teams they need so that they could have a better shot at achieving the missions and visions that they're working so hard towards. We have a great group of people here today from Binkers from all parts of our company. We have alumni from our company here. We have people from our client community from both recruiting and talent orgs as well as on the hiring side. So we're really excited about everyone who's able to find the time to be here with us today. The specific topic that we're going to be diving into today is titled The Art and Science of a Compelling Equity Story. The basic kind of premise and concept is every company has a story. There's a past, present, and future of where they were, where they are right now, and where they're trying to go. And either every company or most companies in our market include in their compensation package some form of equity. And so to the extent that a company's story, their past, their present, and future is able to align with value that an individual or company is able to generate via their equity, very direct correlation to the success that that company is going to have in the attraction and retention of the team that they're building. I can't think of a better person to present on this topic than our partner, Kian Ta. He's a partner at our company. He's a general manager overseeing the delivery of all of our projects in San Francisco. Also moonlights as our general counsel, which he'll share a little bit more about. But he's had the very direct fortune of getting to oversee hiring efforts for some high visibility clients in our ecosystem, from Pinterest to Reddit to Airbnb, all of which kind of went through their own respective journey and story, whose success had a very direct correlation to the alignment of their respective equity story. So I'm really excited to hand the mic over to Kian to be able to share. And just real quick on the logistics front, as far as what everyone here could expect, probably about 30 minutes worth of content that Kian will be sharing. There will be some polls and interactivity intermixed within that. You'll see a chat box on your right, and so anyone that has questions at any point in the presentation, feel free to chat your questions in there. Kirsten from our team will be collecting the questions, and we'll have plenty of time at the end for some back and forth on that. And then also just note that this webinar is being recorded, and we'll share it out to everybody here, so everyone will have to have the benefit of a copy for review afterwards. And with that, I'll pass it over to Kian.
Great. Thanks, Boris, for the great introduction, and thank you all for attending today. I'm pretty excited to be talking about this topic. It's a topic that I'm fairly passionate about. So, as Boris mentioned, as far as my background, I'm currently the general manager for Bink. So what that means is I oversee broadly our San Francisco practice, and I also operate as Bink's general counsel. Before joining Bink, I was an attorney where I focused on litigation, and I also did some light work in corporate finance as well. Today's webinar is going to be coming from my vantage point when I was a recruiter, while also drawing from my experience when I was a litigator before getting into recruiting. So what I'll do is I'm going to show you how I approached every candidate closing situation, and how I approached it similar to how I approached my cases in my prior career, where my position would build up and get stronger and stronger over time. So for the sake of preserving some client confidentiality, I've made up the reference and data points while still hoping to capture the important themes of this presentation. All right, so here's the use case. Early on, I found myself competing quite a bit with this fictitious company. Um, we'll just call them TechBook for today's example. So remember, I'm trying to be a little discreet here for you all. So in competing with TechBook, I dig into what the competing offer was. I'd want to know what the base is, what the bonus is, what the equity was being offered, and what the perks were. And oftentimes when competing with TechBook, my only response back was of shock, jaw drop. Couldn't believe that they're making such an offer. So here's what I found to be a common situation that I was going up against. TechBook would be able to offer a candidate upwards of close to $1 million over the course of 4 years. You know, it would be comprised of about 150 in base, 30K in annual bonus, and then roughly $50,000 in value of RSUs per year. I knew in my situation that the best that we could do was approximately $640,000 over 4 years. You know, 130 in base, no bonus, and then at least on paper, $30,000 worth of stock value per year. So in essence, I was facing a pretty big delta. You know, it was upwards of over $280,000 over 4 years. You know, we were offering less base. We couldn't offer an annual bonus, and the equity at best was not liquid at that point. And so it was more of like a vision that could be achieved if the company should encounter some sort of liquidity event. So the question was, you know, why would any candidate walk away from all this guaranteed money that a company like TechBook would offer? So, you know, what I did was I started retracing my steps through the candidate funnel. You know, what was I doing from the recruiter screening stage, the phone screen, onsite, and onwards, as it related to what I was trying to do and convey the potential upside of the opportunity that I was representing. And when I looked at my arc, it effectively looked like this. It was pretty much not doing anything related to the equity story. I was maybe attempting to do something, but what I found myself was I was faced with this like sudden hill to climb toward the end. And it felt very ineffective because I felt too late in the conversation. Oftentimes I was deferring the equity opportunity to someone else that was quote unquote more of an expert, asking them to kind of like sub in at the 11th hour to try to help with the close. And then in my role as a recruiter in those instances, I definitely got a sense of a loss of ownership of my job because, you know, I'm a firm believer that in talent acquisition, one of the main roles is to be the main driver and facilitator of the close. So this was an ineffective approach. What I wanted a more believable arc. When I practiced law, it was all about building a case starting day one and then adding to it so that over time, our position would grow stronger and stronger and stronger. And that's what I wanted the equity story arc to look like. I wanted something that started day one and built up and continued to build and continue to build, just like I approached my cases. So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to break up the equity story or narrative into 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 is what I call the educate phase. This is the part where you want to spend time as soon as possible in the funnel to educate your candidate on Equity 101. Phase 2 is what we're calling the apply phase. So after you've baselined Equity 101 understanding that you and your candidate are talking the same language, this is where you start sharing real information and data about the growth of your business. And finally, the close phase. This is when you can actually put dollars to the equity potential of what you're offering. All right, let's talk about the first phase, educate. We all know that equity can be a fairly widely misunderstood topic. So the sooner you can spend time to educate your candidate on basic principles, the better. You'll be very thankful for it when you do get to the offer stage. So the education stage should occur as soon as the recruiter screen stage, and no later than when you know your candidate is about to come on site. All right, what's important for the candidate to know, though, as it relates to Equity 101 this early on? You know, you can probably go down the rabbit hole and educate your candidates on equity and the intricacies. But right here is what I'd recommend as being an actionable checklist for you to follow, right? Your candidate should understand the differences between a public company versus a private company. Your candidate should understand what are the differences between RSUs in the market and options and how they operate. Third point is with respect to companies that are still private, meaning startups, your candidate should know that there's two values associated with them. One being what's called the preferred value of a company, and two being what's called the 409A value of a company. The fourth point is if your company is issuing options, they should understand what a strike price is and why there exists a strike price. And then the last point, which I think is probably one of the most important points, is equity is not fixed. So when thinking about total compensation, but base and bonus are really relatively fixed over time with, you know, incremental increases. But equity can actually be the fastest accelerator to change a person's life, because it ties directly to the fruits of a company's growth. And equity growth can be great, it can be bad, and it can be nothing at all, depending on your company's execution. And this is what makes the topic so tricky in this market. I realize some of you who are attending today know what a lot of these points are, and some may not. Unfortunately for today, I'm not going to have the time to go through all the intricacies of these. If there are questions about Equity 101, happy to share my info after today's webinar for any follow-up questions. There is a great resource that you can all go to read about Equity 101 principles. And it's a website called Carta.com. Carta is a company that builds software tools for companies to help manage their cap table. And they produce a really rich and robust blog series on Equity 101 that's catered to both founders and also catered to employees as well. So for purposes of today, consider this page as your Equity 101 checklist. Build that foundation right away with your candidate, and it's going to pay dividends down the road as you advance them further through the funnel. All right, let's go to the first poll question right here. The question is, common shares issued to employees are tied to what company valuation? Is it A, preferred valuation, B, the TechCrunch valuation, C, 409A valuation, or D, all the above? All right, let's get the poll popping up here. Looks like don't see the results coming in yet. All right, there we go. All right, good mix. The majority vote is 409A valuation, and that is correct. Let me walk you all through a little bit more context behind why that is. So option A is preferred valuation. Here's what a preferred valuation is. Think of the preferred valuation as being the negotiated price that exists between an investor and founders of a company as to what they want to buy the shares at, or at least ownership stake in the company at. You know, it's the investor bet on what the company can grow over time. You know, that's at the end of the day, that's the game that's being played between investors and founders and the investments. So when you see in your news feed through TechCrunch or some other publication that company A just raised another round of funding at a certain valuation, usually what they're sharing is the preferred valuation of the company. In other words, what the investors believe and hope the company can grow to, so that at the end of the day, they can capture some sort of a yield of return. The 409A valuation, this is the other valuation that's tied to a private company. It's great that the investment market can kind of come up with their own recipe to determine what a company value can be. 409A is Uncle Sam's approach to try to regulate it to some extent. It actually is in reference directly to a section in the IRS code. And what it does is it comes up, it's a way by which there's a more conservative way to value the company. And so what this does is this actually governs the stock that's issued to employees, and employees are handed over what's called common shares in the market. The 409A valuation is ultimately then what then determines and controls the strike price of each employee of their option. So how's this actually put into practice? So typical lingo in the tech space when it comes to offers usually goes like this. Our stock option is worth $10 per share, and it'll cost you, say, $1 to buy it. Thus, your gain is $9. What really should be said is our investors are betting that each stock option can be worth $10. That's their investment in us, and that's their belief in terms of what we can achieve over the next few years. And then in a conservative way, Uncle Sam says that our stock is worth about $1 right now. And that's how much they want us to charge you to buy our stock. So keep these concepts in mind. I'll go back to these concepts toward the end of today's webinar. All right, let's move on. Okay, let's move on to the second part. This is the apply phase. This is where the bulk of your equity story and build up should occur. It's when you really have the opportunity to build the case toward your growth. Best time to do that is before the onsite, especially if you have a candidate that passed the interview, the phone interview, with very strong signal, and you know that that onsite opportunity is like the time where you want to start gearing up and layering data and reference points supporting the growth of your business. You want to embrace the apply phase up to the offer stage, and sometimes it can bleed a little bit over, but use this as kind of your the bulk of your time in building your case. So what exactly is the apply phase? Well, if we go back to our example earlier going up against TechBook, we knew that we were facing close to a $300,000 difference in total compensation over the course of 4 years. What we did in this specific case is we created this concept that I call the growth map, okay? The growth map, the purpose is to kind of like build a table and a guide so that you can arm yourself and empower yourself to better understand the business and then start building a case for what future growth could be from past, present, and future. What we did was we sat down and we met with the business leaders at our client, and we started partnering up with them to really dig into the vitals of what were the factors that influenced their last round of funding and their valuation. And what we learned was, and what we gathered were a few things. By and large, all companies are evaluated to some extent across three main buckets. One is their income. What's your revenue? What's your profit? Second category is evaluating the market. What are the comparable companies that are in the same space? What is the total market size, whether nationally or globally, in the space that you're in? And then the third point is the assets, both tangible and intangible. Some examples of this included technology, the team, number of users or customers, and the time that they're spending on the platform. So we extracted all of this information and started getting some signal that helped support what the last round of funding was. The next step was to map it to what was happening today, because from my recollection, the last round of funding that this company had was, I think, about a year or two ago. So since then, they've done a lot of really great things to grow the business, and so we had to understand what things look like today. And what we learned was, since the last round of funding, the company had 10x the revenue. We learned that the comparable companies in their space were worth 5 to 10x the value of the company that we are representing. We got some market intelligence that the industry that they're in was valued at $500 billion worldwide. And we knew that the technology that we were building was something that hasn't been done before. And we were able to acquire a team of industry experts, and our user growth was on a trajectory to 10x. So knowing the past and present really painted a picture right here toward growth. The next piece of building out the growth map is then looking at the future. And in looking at the future, we believe that what we are doing was going to be more effective than what existed in the market. There was data supporting that the market was going to increase 5% year over year. And the technology we were building was going to be, in our opinion, first to market at scale. And then based on some trends that we're seeing, there's a realistic believability that over the next 4 years, we could acquire approximately 100 million users or subscribers to what we are doing. So this growth map right here painted a really nice picture for us, and even raised our level of awareness that we're missing before. But we felt something was still missing. You know, we've put together kind of like this recipe, but we're still kind of missing some sort of like compelling drop the hammer statement, if you will, to wrap this all up. So what we did is we put together what I describe as the money script. You know, at the end of the day, every company is ultimately measured by how much money they're making. That's their judgment day. So in this specific example, the money script that we created flowed like this. In the next 4 years, we can have 100 million users because, and our because was supported by the efforts of the information and intel that we collected going through the growth map process. We then believed and knew that from each user, we could actually monetize about $10 because, again, because was answered by the data and information we collected through the growth map exercise. So in marrying points 1 and 2 together, there was believability that our revenue could reach $1 billion in 4 years. And that was a great thing for us. Then took it another step and mapped it to our market. Most companies, if not all companies, depending on the industry that they're in, are valued based on some sort of multiple of their revenue, whether you're building a service, whether you're building a product, etc. So in this specific case, the multiple of revenue that was common was 5. And so when we put 1 through 4 together, we now had an actual believable statement connecting the dots, allowing us to convey that in the next 4 years, should things go as planned and should we execute according to our roadmap, we see ourselves being valued at $5 billion. So we now had something that was what we consider to be transparent, informative, and persuasive to show the future valuation of the company. The story connected a lot more versus an abstract narrative saying that we can 5x or 10x. And I've learned through the years that every company, in order to have an effective equity narrative, there must exist some sort of money script. So for each of you attending today, how can you actually apply this? Well, you know, I highlighted in yellow the variables that you can easily kind of like plug and play per your situation. You know, your company will probably have a slight variation to this, but the central theme will still be how much money can your company make in the future and why. To take things one step further, you can even input numbers here that could map to, I guess, what you would call like a conservative view of the valuation, a realistic view, and also an aggressive view. In this example, we took the realistic road. All right, let's move on to the second poll question right here. The second poll question is, the growth map should be A, a low priority, B, medium priority, C, high priority, or D, depends. All right, polls are coming in. Nice. All right, the answer is high priority. So majority vote wins. All right, let's talk about the why here. The growth map and some variation of it, think of it as your starting point to actually help your candidate tangibly understand and believe in the growth opportunity that you're presenting to them. Without it, like I said earlier, your growth narrative is going to feel abstract and non-believable. You know, every company is going to be different in some subtle ways with respect to the vitals that support their growth and how they make money, and that's going to be expected. The point is, a growth map, though, or at least the process of it, is the best way to pull together all the reference points at your disposal so that you can start weaving it into a compelling equity story. You'll know you're doing it right, or at least approaching this right, if your excitement level shoots up while you're building the map. And most importantly, you know you're doing it right if you're really excited to start talking to your candidate about the information that you've gathered in building the growth map. All right, making good time here. All right, so we've covered the educate and the apply phase, and now it's the last phase. This is the phase called the close. This is the time where you can actually start applying your growth story to the offer numbers. All right, this right here is a compensation calculator. Almost every company that we've helped that has a strong closing culture has built some variation of this. We use this internally at Bink and in partnership with our clients. If we go back to the TechBook competing offer example and what we were able to offer, we know that, looking at the pop-up that I did with the circle, we know that we were able to offer about $130,000 in base and 24,000 quote unquote shares. We also know that based on our offer and equity offering we were making, we knew that the preferred value of each share was approximately $5. So if you remember the poll question that I had earlier on, preferred value is what the investors believe that equity can be worth over time. We also knew that the internal value, or also known as the 490 value, was worth about $1. So in essence, this was the strike price that the employee or the future employee would face should they join the company. So the delta here was approximately $4. What we then did was, this calculator enables you to then build out what the 4-year outlook could look like. And in this instance, based on investor believability of growth and how much it would cost for the candidate to purchase the options, they were looking at approximately $640,000 in potential value for their total compensation. How did this map to then the TechBook competing offer? Well, the TechBook competing offer was just under $1 million, as shown in this blue example as a reference point. Well, through our growth map process and through the money script that we created a vision now, both supported by data and trends, toward believability that we can be valued at $5 billion. This was our realistic forecast. So where does that line up on this table? Well, at a $5 billion valuation, suddenly the total compensation package that we were offering the candidate was hovering close to $3 million. This was what we realistically believe could happen. Layer in, had we inputted numbers to show more of an aggressive view, you can see that green arrow showing what the aggressive version of that could look like. And then you can even take a conservative approach where the yellow arrow to the left shows more of a conservative view of what our total compensation package could look like. So suddenly, TechBook's offer doesn't appear as impossible to beat. it's actually very realistic to beat. Our realistic potential beat TechBook's number. Our aggressive potential beat TechBook by many multiples, and our conservative potential probably fell in the range of what the TechBook offer was. So remember how I said earlier, though, that equity is not fixed. It can go really well or it can go sideways. The point of this closing phase in this table is to be thoughtful and not represent these future equity numbers as a lock or certainty. What you're actually doing is you want to give a picture of the today based on a number of built-in assumptions and data points. And then you want to be able to deliver what I would call a more tangible roadmap supporting growth and what that can ultimately mean to your candidate. All right, so we've covered a lot today. Here's the takeaway. Your equity story should start day one and get stronger and stronger over time. In phase one, spend the time to level set equity 101 understanding with your candidate. In phase two, this is the part where you want to apply the growth map and bring it together with a money script. And then in phase three, this is where you want to apply the compensation calculator to deliver your offer and the company's growth into one seamless narrative. And if you do it all well, when faced against an offer coming from TechBook, instead of being shocked, you would have set the stage and the buildup so that your candidate responds back to you with, "I'm ready to sign with you." All right. Thank you all for attending. Hopefully you enjoyed today's topic. And I think we're going to move on to questions right now.
Yes, but first we're going to do a quick survey poll and then we'll start the questions. While those questions, while the survey questions are being answered, we'll go ahead and pull up a few of our questions. Can, the first question is, how do we speak about dilution?
Ooh, that's a great question. And I'm looking at the chat box here. Matt is asking about that. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, dilution is something that should be recognized as being a potential that can exist down the road. One way to think about it, I've encountered this situation before, is because dilution is in reference to the equity pool. Like if you think of the equity pool as being a number of like different slices of pie, and then over time the share of the pie, the value of the pie of the employee kind of goes down because more investors are putting money into the company. What I found to be effective with candidates is to let them know that in a good scenario, when the company's value continues to rise, they shouldn't worry too much about dilution, because at the end of the day, there's still some level of gain that they're going to experience. You know, businesses that are really smart with their cap table and their growth make wise decisions when it comes to the growth of their company and future investor rounds that they want to take, and then what percent those investors are going to own of the company as the company progresses. So if your company's smart about the cap table and the growth and what money you want to take in, at the end of the day, the employee who holds the common share should still come out on top.
Thanks, Ken. We have another question from Liz. Do you talk about the potential RSU growth value for TechBook when comparing offers for candidates?
Yes. Good question, Liz. I didn't have time to kind of insert that in when you're talking about a competing offer, but if you go to the compensation calculator in the close phase, there's definitely an element of discussion if the candidate is looking at a competing offer from TechBook, especially if the competing offer is from a publicly traded company where you could easily open up your app on your iPhone and look at the stock ticker and then look at historical trend of how TechBook's offer has grown. So what that would do, it's just going to add another element to evaluate what your conservative, what your aggressive, and what your realistic valuation could be over the next 4 years, mapped against the same scenario. What could be the conservative, realistic, and aggressive valuation of the equity for the competing offer?
Great, thanks, Ken. The next question is, I've heard the term fair market value and internal value. What does this mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of synonyms that kind of float around the Bay Area that people talk about with respect to valuation. The term fair market value is equivalent to the 409A value. Fair market is in reference to the common share value, and the common share value is associated with the 409A. So when you hear somebody say the fair market value of my company is $200 million, it's the same thing as saying that the 409A value of my company is $200 million. Likewise, internal value as well. Internal is used interchangeably with 409A and also with fair market value.
And we have two more questions. Looks like, what happens if you work for a company where not all info and growth map is available?
Great question. So that'll definitely exist. The growth map, think of it as being a kind of like a checklist of things that you want to gather. And oftentimes, especially for companies that are too early stage, all the points on the growth map may not exist. So the best thing to do is to just go through the process and collect what you can collect. 9 out of 10 times when you do that, you're going to see some sort of narrative form related to the growth. So it's doing that process is better than not doing that process, because if you don't go through that process, what I oftentimes see most talent acquisition leaders and even founders say when they're talking to candidates about their growth, they'll just make a broad statement that we believe we can 10x over the next 4 years, but there's no like backing it. Think of the growth map as your opportunity to figure out how to back that up.
And Amanda would like to know, how would I coach a phone screener hiring manager to help continue building a compelling equity story? What content should they share?
What was the question again? Can you repeat it?
Sure.
Kristen?
How would I coach a phone screener or hiring manager to help continue building a compelling equity story? What content should they share?
Yeah, good question. It's how to partner with the business leaders on them adding information as well. Trying to draw from some use cases. So here's what I've done in the past, where let's say I had a candidate that just crushed his or her phone interview, and on paper the team is really excited about that individual leading up to the on-site stage. I know already that one of the key things in being able to effectively make the offer and close the candidate, should an offer come down, is believability that the company could grow. So what we would do in that instance is before the candidate comes on site, we would kind of like do a roundup, or kind of like we would do a quick stand-up with the interviewing team. As is best practice in interviewing, company wants to obviously spend time to kind of vet the candidate in his or her skill set, but you also wanted to open it up a little bit to some Q&A for the candidate to extract what they want to know, so that they can make a meaningful decision. That period in the on-site could be a great window to arm and talk to the interviewing panel to share some vitals that they're already seeing in their business that lend to growth. If they start kind of like marinating that into the candidate during the on-site stage, you in talent acquisition, in your follow-up conversations with the candidate, can start adding to that storyline as well, so that by the time you get to offer, you're not playing catch up with the buildup of the growth story. All you have to do at the offer stage is marry in the numbers to the believability of growth that you've already established.
And Sarah would like to know, is it a good thing, bad thing, or nothing when the 409A value and the preferred price value are close together versus far apart? what does the difference imply?
Oh, that's a pretty advanced question there by Sarah. It can be a good or bad thing, and here's why it could be a good or bad thing. Um, there's definitely some truth that companies, many companies actually in the tech space when they're startup, they're not focusing on making money. What they're focusing on is the potential and the buildup of the assets, so that at a certain point in time, when they've established a certain uh, sizable mass, they can then turn on the revenue stream. So in that instance, uh, you'll oftentimes see a company with a very low 409A value, because the 409A process is governed by the IRS, and when the IRS is doing a valuation of the company's not making any money. The best thing they can do is just understand its assets, so it's going to have a very low 409A value. In that instance, it's actually very favorable for the employee, because what that means is the employee is going to have a low strike price, and you want employees to have low strike price. Um, if the company is in a market where there's already historical precedence about what the future value of that product can be, should they amass a certain size of members or customers, you can have a situation where the preferred value is significantly higher than the 409A value, thus creating a wide delta. So that would actually be a great thing for early stage employees. A bad scenario is what we've seen with later stage employees, where the 409A value and the preferred value starts kind of like converging together. What that inevitably means, and I've seen as being kind of a bad thing for employees, is their strike price is really high. And depending on the number of shares that are issued to those employees, it's almost like prohibitive for them to be able to even find the money or the capital to then buy and exercise their options.
And we'll do one more question. Can you please briefly go over TechCrunch valuation and strike price? If anyone else has any other questions after that, go ahead and type them into the chat, and we'll get back to you after the webinar.
Okay. So the question is briefly go over TechCrunch valuation. What else?
TechCrunch valuation and strike price.
Strike price. Okay. So the TechCrunch valuation example, I just use TechCrunch as being an example of any other news feed that you see. When many of you probably have your news app on your phone, and you'll click through and you'll see a news feed of company A who just raised a big round of funding at a certain valuation. When you see that in the news, it's not sharing what the 409A value is of a company. That's by and large not something that a company will share broadly to the market to be published. What's being shared is the preferred valuation. It's saying that this group of investors bought some more preferred shares of the company with the belief and hope that the company will hit a certain valuation over the next few years, so that they can get their rate of return. So TechCrunch valuation, you see an article about it, says a company's worth $1 billion. Better safe to assume, and more often than not, that that's in reference to investors believing that it can be worth that valuation. And then the last one was the strike price, I think.
Yes, that's correct.
I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, the strike price is, in the context of options, unlike an RSU is something that an employee gets outright. That's issued from the company, whereas with options, what that is, it's the company letting the employee know, we are giving you the option in order to purchase our stock, but that option and to exercise it is going to cost a certain amount of money. So the strike price is how much an employee needs to pay to exercise the right to then own the equity that the company's offering.
Great.
And
Thanks,
there's math tied to how to calculate what a strike price is, along with preferred value, that I'm happy to walk somebody through after this webinar.
Great. Thanks, Ken. That's all the questions that we have time for today.
Okay. Great. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this talk. Again, 3 points. It's building up the equity story and educate, apply, and then close. Thank you.